Oh, Bree, tell me
Yeah.
all about New Hampshire.
Oh, I love New Hampshire mostly. Today it's super humid and
Yeah.
so because I originally when you had asked about like an image to paint and I was like, oh, I
Hmm.
wonder if we could make this happen in a plein air environment, but it's just so uncertain what we're going to end up with. So
Yeah. Um,
indoors is a little better.
Eventually, I'd like to do some of these videos side by side in an outdoor setting. It just seems as though with everything that's happening right now, it may just be simpler to do it over Skype,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
then I can record the audio, and if the audio is super riveting, we can make it even into a podcast.
Yeah. Wow. So exciting. I
Okay.
seriously like cannot get enough art podcasts, so
Oh,
keep them
cool.
coming. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I listen to like a lot of women, so it's cool to see like and I didn't realize that you were doing a podcast until you messaged me and then I kind of went down the rabbit hole and started looking. So it's really cool what you're doing.
Yeah, I decided to start one with a friend from New Orleans, Bonnie, and
Yep.
we both kind of changed our careers maybe 10 years in. She was a jeweler and I was a sculptor. And um, yeah, so we decided to paint. She's been at it for a little over 2 years, and I've been at it for about nine. So we thought, hey, we both can't really podcast. We have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we both often feel like we have no idea what we're doing when we paint. So we might as well just double down.
It's really surprising to me, I think, because I think when I see your work, it feels very, I don't know, like rooted in color theory and it feels really technical. And so I think I was surprised, not that, like, I think that there are a lot of like amazingly successful artists that went to art school and didn't go to art school and vice versa. But
Yeah.
I think seeing your work, that surprised me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
totally. So I don't I feel like you guys and just listening to body paint too, like I don't get that impression that you don't know what you're doing.
Oh, that's very kind of you. And by the end of today's dual PaintCast thing, you may have a completely different opinion,
Okay.
which
All right. I mean, but like do any of us really know what we're doing? It's all just like an
oh,
invention and an experiment.
it definitely feels like some people do online.
That's yeah.
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 Maybe not, it doesn't always appear that they do online, but it certainly seems that way when they begin to talk about themselves. So,
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think there's like different yeah. Even I think just like I've been thinking a lot and I think you hear a lot of stories about like critiques in school and like how they like crush
mm,
people and I think it scares people away from talking critically about their work because people always get criticism. I feel like out of a place like it always comes from a place of like jealousy or
yeah.
um like being condescending where like it doesn't have to be that way and I think like people who talk about art that way in like a pretentious way like that's hope I don't know. I feel like it's becoming less of the norm, at least. I think probably 20 years ago it was maybe more like that.
I hope so, because most times when they begin into that realm, I almost think it's one of those ASMR videos where they're just trying to put people to sleep.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah. At least throw a
for
few
sure.
F-bombs in there or something.
I know. I know.
Jeez.
I'm
Hey,
100%. That wins me over every time.
by the way, are you mixing something? Are you
I'm
painting?
mixing so many. Yeah, I'm mixing a
Oh,
lot
okay.
right now.
Okay. Because
Are you like,
some
is your video
painters,
frozen?
Well, I wasn't sure.
So that's something I was thinking about, and I almost started pre-mixing everything because what I
Okay.
do is I typically run through the picture visually first
Hmm.
and try and mix like on my palette the majority of my larger areas of color. Um,
Yes.
and so it's like that's the most time consuming piece for me. And then the actual application of paint, I think,
Hmm.
happens a little bit more intuitively. Um, but
I do
I'm
not
I'm
pre-mix
almost
any
there, so
colors.
I hope it's not wicked boring.
No, no. Uh, I just happen to be self-taught in the worst way. So everything
Say
I
more.
do is sort of um, a cringe factor for other people watching, and I'm perfectly okay with it. Just like
Yeah.
I'm perfectly okay with driving down the highway in my huge bus, towing our car, and going 55 and a 75. I'm okay pissing people off sometimes.
That's,
It's just kind of part of my personality.
yeah. I think though you got I mean, I think that's wonderful and like you're self-aware.
Yeah,
And I think there are things that like everybody has their different way of painting and that works for them. And I feel like there were so many rules. I graduated in 2014, so I've been out for a little while with my
okay.
undergrad, but like there are still things that professors said that like ring around in my head, but like don't serve me necessarily.
Like what? Like what? Dish.
Well, just like things like don't use photos. Like you don't paint from photos because it was a very like observational heavy program.
Hmm.
But that's something that isn't always realistic for
Where'd you go to
me.
school again?
At the University of New Hampshire, and
Okay.
I had a wonderful experience. Like loved most of my professors, and I did feel supported. But there were certain things and expectations where I think as an artist you have to acknowledge like what's going to work for you and what you're going to let go of. Um,
Yes.
like there are some things like I don't ever use like white unmixed in a
Hmm.
painting, and I don't put Mars Black on my palette, and that's something for me that definitely came from school and stuck with me. But I see artists that do use that and do that, and it works for them. And so I tend to notice that of like
Okay.
these rules are trying to think almost superficial or like constructed, and it doesn't make you need to right like you just need to find what serves you as an artist and what works for
Yeah.
you to be able to communicate. So yeah. All right.
Hmm. So it looks like you blocked
First
in
mark.
everything,
Yes. Yep.
and that you. What color did you use to?
That was quinacridone red
Okay.
for my underpainting,
So you did a
which
full underpainting.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
um
That's something that I never do.
Really.
Never, because um, as you might know, I started painting uh, out on the street in front of
Yes.
people that I was trying to
Right.
sell to.
Yep.
So I did not have the luxury of thinking it through too much,
Yeah, for
because a lot of
sure.
times when I went out, if I had maybe 3 or 4 originals, if I
Yep.
sold those originals by 10 a.m., I still had another 6 or 7 hours of possible money to make.
Mhm.
So you get into this crazy, crazy habit of just hustling and churning out
Yeah.
more pieces that are somewhat similar, maybe.
Yep. Yep.
And I got into that really early.
How do like for you, did that become was that burdensome? Like, did you dislike that part of your work there? And has that shifted as you like left New
Well,
Orleans or?
it has not shifted a lot, and I actually came to enjoy some of it. Just
Yeah.
as you were speaking a few moments ago about the critiques a few
Yeah.
years ago that you had in your undergrad, in
Yeah.
the 90s, when I was getting my undergrad at the Lime Academy College in Connecticut, uh,
Mhm.
it was very extreme.
Yeah.
As a sculptor, I had, for a composition class, I had a few 90-year-old world-renowned um, figurative sculptors
Stop.
essentially tell me that I was a punk day in and
Oh,
day out. And so I sort of kept that in the back of my mind, but as I taught myself new skills, it just kind of creeped back in, you know?
yeah. Yeah, for
And
sure. Oh,
so,
wiggling.
I'm not sure if that really answered your question, but
No, it does. It does. Like that, right.
okay.
Like, and I think we all have those moments of just like discouragement or like people who are like, no, that's like not, it's not the way you sculpt or that's not the way you
Yeah,
paint. And even if we've like dealt with that and like healed that, they still like that comes back sometimes completely.
yeah.
Um, for sure. So are you traveling like a lot? Like, do you cover a lot of land or you stay in one space for the most part?
Am I interviewing you or are you interviewing
I'm
me?
sorry. You can.
No,
This is supposed
I
to be
will answer.
conversational,
Oh,
Chris,
no, no,
right? I
no.
had so many questions.
I will gladly answer all your questions. However, in the back of my mind, I fear that my story is not nearly as interesting as other people's. So, just as that small qualifier, um,
Okay, all right. I'll keep that in mind.
I have been traveling um, for the past 12 years now. And at first, I was kind of anchored down in Colorado
Yep.
with a sculpture job that I got right when I got on the road. And then I moved away from that and I started to try to figure out where else I could go and found New Orleans, started painting, but then
Mm-hmm.
realized that I could only stay there for the on season.
Yeah.
So that was maybe 7 months out of the year. The other 5 months, it was way too dead and hot. So we had to leave, and it was perfect to be able to um, get into the coach and just bugger on out of there.
That's
And
fantastic.
um, we did that for a few years, and then um, my wife decided that we should have another child because our daughter at the time when we first got there was 4, maybe
Uh-huh.
5. So we actually got um, an apartment just outside of the French Quarter
Okay.
and stored the motorhome for about a year. And I stayed there during the summer of a hurricane that blew through. It was only a Category 1, but it was so disgusting that
Uh,
we decided afterwards that we'd never spend another summer there. So
yeah.
that's when we got back into the coach and started to travel more. And then I just sort of thought, well, I should probably do everything online and I should probably go west.
Mm-hmm.
I need to actually know people who are like painters in alternative fashions, not
Yeah.
so much the wake up, hustle, drink, go to sleep, rinse and repeat cycle of artists
Yes.
that, hey, I I understand the lifestyle, and I really like the people who do it. But for me, that wasn't really sustainable
Mm-hmm.
as a husband and father of two.
For sure.
There's some point where you just have to pretend to be more responsible. So I think that was 2017,
Okay.
and so ever since then, I have been traveling and painting, and I get my fix for the public and the public eye
Mm-hmm.
by before going to places like Starbucks
Yeah.
and painting there in public every day. And when that all left in March of this year,
Yeah.
I've been doing more plein air, and that's when I decided that I was going to force a good friend of mine, Bonnie, who I have the podcast with,
Yep.
to waste her time talking and painting with me, and that's the direction we're going, and that's why we're
That's
here right
fantastic.
now, painting and chit chatting, and
Uh-huh.
it's really interesting to see what the other person is doing and how they're applying the
Yeah.
paint
Yeah.
and where they're going. And whenever I watch these things back again, um, I always am a little surprised at what I did, but um, even more intrigued on what the other painter was doing as I was
Mm-hmm.
going about my own business in some sort of semi-conscious manner.
Right. It
And,
it is. It's like things are when you compare or like are responding to work that's finished, you only have that last moment of the work and just there's like a whole nother story. Like when I was watching back like a couple of your past episodes, like I've watched time lapses of artists doing their work and stuff before, but to see it in real time was really cool and really interesting. So
good, because I know it's not good yet. I know that what we're doing here is minimally entertaining,
yeah,
minimally educational, but I think there's something to it.
I
And
think so too.
I started this whole idea of paint casting and doing this dual painting thing
Hmm.
back when I first got on the road again full time in 2017. And I started to make a YouTube channel, and I tried to do it by myself
Yeah.
before I was going to speak with other people, but
Yep.
it was way too difficult to just talk and remember stories and paint at the same time. And I mean, I really know now why when you watch some of the painting videos people have on classical piano music
Yeah.
or have something else, and they speak every 2 or 3 minutes, and they say things like, yeah, I like that passage there, or this needs to be darker, you know?
Yeah. Like it's like an internal dialogue just out loud
Yes.
almost. I mean, even now I feel like I'm paying attention to you and like to this conversation and I've already a couple of times found myself being like, wait, what was I doing? Or like, what am I mixing?
Yeah.
So
It's strangely difficult.
yeah, it is. It is. But it's a really good like experiment too. I don't know. I think too with COVID and everybody. So I was teaching actually. Last year was my first year
Oh,
teaching art
teaching painting.
K through 8. So I was teaching
Oh,
like general art, and
yes.
it was such a interesting experience. It was tough, and but at the same time, like everybody kind of learning to make do and like find connection virtually, I think
Hmm.
is really fascinating. And I feel like I've seen more opportunities for artists to connect because the work that we do is so solitary. Um,
Yeah.
And so I think that people are maybe utilizing those tools a little bit more, like to do this together. And honestly, like if I hadn't spent the last few months on Zoom with a bunch of middle schoolers and elementary schoolers, I don't know how comfortable I would have been accepting the offer. But I had a lot of
Interesting.
experience not knowing what to expect on a call. So,
Okay. Good.
yeah.
Yeah. I did 1 year of high school art teaching,
Uh-huh.
and
Yep.
I think it was back in 2007, and it was something that I knew after that I never wanted to do again.
Yep.
And it works for some people, and it just doesn't for others.
No.
And I had a good time with the kids who I taught, and I was actually able to go in and rewrite the entire curriculum. As long
Yes.
as they learn certain things at certain stages, I
Yep.
could do it any way that I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically just did a fine arts and art history only
Yeah.
thing with everyone,
Yep.
and I tried to unteach them drawing.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
That's
and
tough.
yeah, so I went in, and, I don't know what you have to do
Yep.
with your kids, but the kids I had, uh, they were unsure of how to even hold a utensil to draw
Oh,
with.
for sure.
They
Yeah.
were approaching it as if they were writing their name, and so I had to break some habits
Mm-hmm.
right off the bat.
Yeah, I interned in a high school and really,
Hmm.
really loved that. I was actually in a jewelry making studio, and it
Okay.
was out of my wheelhouse, right? Because I studied painting. But I loved that age group. And so I actually decided I did not renew my contract, so I'm going to try the full-time artist thing for a while
Okay.
after having the experience of last year.
Yeah.
But I think when I do go back to it eventually, I'm thinking high school is what I want. Because at least, like, if you're like, oh, that's not how you hold a pencil, they understand what you're saying to some extent.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, our curriculum was very much, I actually redesigned it as well, and to align with the National Court Art Standards, which were just put in to place a few years ago, but focusing on talking about art and reflecting on art in addition to the formal creating portion of it, and just like being able to think artistically.
Hmm.
It was really, I mean, it was fun to do it with these kids. Just definitely a learning curve for me as a new teacher too.
Yeah, I secretly
That's a
think
mess.
that I was
Sorry.
hired for two reasons. One, the um, the head of the art department at this high school
Mm-hmm.
was super impressed with my portfolio,
Yeah.
and two, he was concerned that some of the other applicants wouldn't be able to control the classroom.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I have this certain way about me where kids at first don't know what to make of me,
Uh-huh.
and I'm sort of this cartoon Hogwarts professor who keeps asking if people belong in the class. So
That's amazing.
I never had any behavior issues,
That's
which was
fantastic.
that was for some reason really important at this specific school, was
Yeah.
making sure that kids didn't go absolute hog wild.
Yep.
And I really just could have prevented a Lord of the Flies situation and still had a job. But I decided that I was going to give it the old college try,
Mm-hmm.
despite the
So
circumstances.
did you do that just for a year?
Yes.
Yep.
And I did it to supplement some other teaching jobs that I was doing, but I really didn't enjoy them. So I thought, well, if I could just get one kind of a little bit more steady, stable teaching gig going, then I can focus more on some shows and getting some of my own work
Yep.
completed. Of course, none of that happened. I ended up just I ended up binge watching Dexter and building some kind of giant castle thing with all my daughter's Legos, and I kept
Oh my God.
collecting Legos, but they weren't exactly for her. They were more for me, just
More
to
for
make
you.
stuff. Yeah. So
Yep.
that whole period of my life when I was in Rhode Island was a little bit of a spiral.
That was in Rhode Island. Is that where you went to school?
No, I went to school in Connecticut, in Old Lyme at the Lyme Academy College. And then my wife, who I met at the school, is from Rhode Island. And so we decided that we would give living there a try because we were both from New England. And yeah.
Okay. All right. So
I
you
still like it. We still go
Yeah.
back. I mean, I was in your neck of the woods last autumn, and I
No
was doing
way.
some painting there. Yeah.
How'd you like it painting from a painting perspective?
I only did one plein air, and the rest of the time I sat at Dunkin' Donuts.
That makes me so happy.
Because, yeah, I think I mentioned maybe in another podcast with someone else, I had an experience in New Hampshire when I was outside painting on my car, and some people came by. They were really interested at first, and then they started to ask me if I had permission to be painting where I was, and they got a little bit kind of militant with me about it.
Really?
So I was just, I thought, it's easier if I just go and buy a coffee and sit at Dunkin' and do all this,
Yeah. That's the thing, like hearing about your experience, like painting very publicly, like I don't think I could do it. That sounds horrible to me. Like even when I was a student, I went and I did a few paintings in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So it's like really touristy.
Yeah.
And really busy downtown area. And I think I was just very hyper aware of all the people around me, and like they would stop and talk even if I had headphones in. And I think I like being visible and like sharing work and like having artists out in the community. But at the same time, like when I'm painting, it's such a personal, like meditative experience almost. So that's hard for me to do in public.
Yes.
So I give you props for that.
I don't think it ever got easier.
No.
From when I first started, it just got, it was just more of a psychological issue.
Yeah.
Where you start to need other people's eyes when you work in order to feel as though you're kind of in the zone.
Yep.
And that you're not just going through the motions.
I gotcha.
And the odd part about that is whenever I was in public making some of the paintings I was doing, I was repainting pieces I had already, like originals I had already painted and sold. So it wasn't like I was doing anything but phoning it in.
That's so
And
interesting.
then I was sitting out there thinking, oh, because I'm around other people, I'm definitely not phoning it in.
Yep. It's like
Yeah.
they were holding you accountable
Um,
almost, right?
that's a very accurate way to put it. Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, I get that. That makes sense to me. Of
Yeah.
like, even though it's uncomfortable, it's like kind of necessary.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I see that you use a lot of broader pieces of paint.
yeah. Yes.
And I'm interested because it looks like you used a smaller brush for your underpainting drawing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you
Yeah.
sort of go over those lines
Mm-hmm.
with those large pieces of color with a palette knife. How did you
Yeah.
arrive
The
at
brush. Yeah, the brush allows me to like get a transparent layer pretty quickly.
Okay.
But I think that for me, I try and keep it really open and really I try and not get too attached to any one part. And so like sometimes I'll use a paintbrush in the beginning, depending on the painting. But lately I've been using mostly all palette knife, and I will almost like block in these really rough areas of color, and then I'll
Yeah.
start to come in and like almost carve in or scrape in other smaller areas of color. And it like doesn't look pretty at all of the stages, but for it's like I think I don't get the same effect if it just happens through the first pass. Like it almost has to take that scraping down and relayering and that messiness for me. Like
You preach
I
in the
just want to.
choir.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like I want to get
exactly what I
paint
want.
on this canvas that I can push around.
Yeah.
And I think I'm actually working a little bit more slowly and cautiously than I normally do right now. Like I'm surprised it's not covered yet, which is maybe a bit of a product of being a bit self-conscious at the moment. But it's happening. It's coming together.
Good. Yeah.
You're able in your work to get really clean, like bright colors with like a lot of impasto. Like, do you do a lot of scraping down too? Or is it almost like, do you ever let it dry and then layer on more thick paint? No, it's always wet into wet.
I'm way too impatient for that.
Me
I
too.
would rather throw it right out the window than leave it to dry and go back to it. So if you see, I have one of these oak blade palette knives here, and I use the tip where I'm pointing with my thumb, and I'll take it and I will go against my board. I don't really use canvases too often. And I will crosshatch because I am a trained figurative sculptor. And and I want to start to take some of the paint down and get some of the form back, and then I will mix up a color and kind of go over with a big piece over the area that I just scraped down. So that's part of my process. A lot of people DM me and ask me if I'm using a palette knife or a brush. And I say both. And they never understand how I do it. And
that's interesting.
I just go back and forth. And I have responded that way to many people. And their response to me is always a little incredulous. There's, oh yeah, thanks so much for the reply. Great. Okay. I'll see if I can try. You can just hear them kind of back out of the conversation. And
Yes. I get that question a lot too. And sometimes like, I don't know why, like I travel with my brushes too. And sometimes like if I'm getting lost with the palette knife or it's like not working for me, I'll do a pass through with the brush and then go back to the knife. Or it might be one mark with the brush, just depending on how I'm feeling. But I saw that video that you did of the painting with the key, that like
Oh
old
yeah.
key. Oh my gosh. What did you call the impractical tool? Is that what you called it?
I
Like,
think so. Yeah.
yeah. Oh my gosh. That looked so frustrating.
It was what, I did like 4 or 5 videos using crazy tools to try to paint with,
Yeah.
and the audio was so bad
Just the
with the other
scratching.
ones that I was just like, you know what? I would have to redub this whole thing and talk over it
Yep.
and be like, yeah, and now what I'm doing is, and
Oh,
people wouldn't be able to actually hear the sound, but the
yeah. Yep.
sound on the
That makes sense.
glass of other implements that I used to paint with was atrocious. So I ended up just scrapping those. I shot close to 35 videos like that, where I
Yeah.
was
Oh my
talking
gosh.
and trying to work things out, and I posted them over the years. Sometimes I only sent the link to a few different people so
Yep.
they could tell me how bad they were, and most of the time they told me how bad it really was.
Just get
So
some feedback.
yeah, and I kept trying and kept trying, but I was doing it all by myself, and I was not using the proper materials because I was way too cheap to actually go out and get the proper things or get like a GoPro and teach myself anything about it. I'm a little bit better about that now, but there's a certain part to my nature which is woefully cavalier when it comes to producing videos.
Uh-huh. It's such a pain. It really is. And I think like there's value in it in terms of like the business side of being an artist and like putting yourself out there, and I'm like trying to do time lapses, but like you'll set it all up and you'll spend all this time and then you're like, oh, but it's crap. Like it's
Yeah.
awful. Like the quality is awful, and I just there's so much time that goes into just like figuring out the equipment and the setup and the sound.
I tried really hard to have a Patreon a little while ago,
Yeah,
and
I've looked at that.
I had to
Not
stop
yours.
it.
I've looked at doing that.
I stopped mine and sent an apology letter to all of the people who paid money to watch me paint, because I was really frank about it, and I basically said, hey, I'm doing a real shit job here, and even though you're only paying like $4 or $5 to see me do this every month, my videos are just not great, and I'm putting a lot of effort into them, and they're not improving. So I'm just
Yep.
gonna stop this. I'm just gonna walk away and see if
Call it a wash.
I'm gonna see if I can figure this out in another way. And yeah, everyone was okay with it except for one person.
Really?
Yes, they were so angry, and they had only been supporting me for maybe 4 months, so I think it was a total of $20, and I think they must have spent 4 to 5 hours on the letter they sent to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They were
That's
not happy.
fascinating.
They were not happy
I mean,
with me.
what are you going to do? Like, you tried.
I don't know. Yeah.
Like, it's not just going to generate itself.
Yeah. People are sometimes not okay with other folks who maybe they think they're going to learn something from.
Oh, yeah.
Just admitting failure. And
I know.
I had no idea that people were going to be
That's
that upset at the fact that I said, well, yeah, I thought I could do it, and I really can't keep buying my paintings online, adios.
yeah. That's how you can support.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Oh.
How big of a palette are you using, Brie?
Oh, this is like, here, I'm going to move it so I can show you, but I'm going to get paint all over my phone.
Okay.
That's my glass palette. But then
Wow.
I also usually have this one that's like underneath all my stuff right now. Like I
Uh-huh.
use this gigantic palette, and
Wow.
that's like my biggest obstacle painting plein air is using my little French easel
Yeah.
palette.
I'm going to show you my
Yeah.
palette and everyone else my palette now.
Oh
I'm
my
going to take it
gosh.
up and put it in front of my painting. It is an 8x8 piece of tempered glass. And I
Wow.
mix and scrape down, and I use that for like 4-foot by 4-foot paintings, and I use it for
That's
4-inch by 4-inch
incredible.
paintings.
I'm
I
gonna
just
try.
got used to having to take everything with me all the time,
Uh-huh.
and I have
It,
everything super mobile.
that's so funny. I mean, I like this glass piece the bigger one that I'm not using right now came from an IKEA frame that we like were given and then threw out the rest of it and I just made it into a palette because it's like anytime we
Oh,
have like
cool.
leftover glass, that's
Yeah.
my thought. Yep.
I was fortunate enough to replace some of the tempered glass in my motor coach, and I just used the old tempered glass that was frosted on one
Nice.
side. And yeah, I have a slightly larger piece too
Mm-hmm.
that I can sometimes use, but I've only really done that with acrylic because,
Yeah.
yeah, the kind of sloppy nature and runny nature of
Hey
acrylic
Chris, I'm
paint
gonna
made
stop
it.
you for a second. My phone is like 2%, so I'm unplugging my headphones and I'm gonna plug in my.
Oh,
Hold on.
well,
Did I get it?
hello.